Welcome to this podcast, Amy. How?
Hi,
Hi. How are you this morning?
excited to join you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great, great. Um, just FYI, I have a little dog and there's some people working in my complex. So if she barks, hopefully she won't. We'll see how it goes.
All right.
All right. So I know that you and I met. I invited you to this recording because you and I met a few years ago at Association for Comprehensive Energy Psych when we were both going through a training. And I was excited to see another Asian American therapist there. I think we were one of the few. So I think we sort of gravitated toward each other, and I believe we have a little bit of a similar degree. And so I really wanted to invite you to talk about your work and your offerings to the world. I think you have really stepped into this energy work as a healer, and I just would like the audience in the world to sort of hear more about you and how you in this path came into this focus. So maybe I'll start to have you introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellen. And I was just recalling as you were talking about that conference. I remember it was in Austin, Texas, and it was actually the first time that I had ever been in Texas. And it was actually such a beautiful experience to be there. And I was so happy to meet folks and see how warm and welcoming the community is out there. And I had attended that training because I am a psychologist. I'm actually not a clinical psychologist. I got my master's degree in counseling psychology at UCSB. But during that time, I realized for me that doing one-on-one talk therapy wasn't actually what I saw myself doing long term. And so I switched, and after doing my master's, I continued my PhD in cultural and social psychology.
Ah,
And so, a long story, during that path, I actually was starting out as a researcher, but again, in 2014, really started doing an about face and how funny to come back to
mm,
counseling and healing, but in a very different way through energy
ah,
healing. And I was actually studying something called bioenergy practice. And in that bioenergy modality, they were using a lot of the energy healing practices, the subtle energy, subtle body energy work, like chakras and meridian work, but also with physiology. And what I realized was like, oh, I'm a psychologist. I missed the psychological aspect of it. And that's why I sought out ASAP and sought out other psychologists who were doing this intersection of work with energy healing, with subtle energy work, plus psychology. So that's how I ended up meeting you
yeah.
that week.
Awesome. And I know that you really fully stepped into it. And I'm still in more of a traditional sort of talk therapy and integrating energy, if people are open to it, and mind body sort of connection. And so I really admire you just going in and putting yourself out there like this. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what your work looks like. And your website is vibrational energy. And I don't know if you could help people understand what vibrational energy
Hmm.
is and your
Hmm.
idea and how that uh comes across in your work with people.
Definitely. So I think like, in pop culture, people always talk about vibes or like good vibes, bad vibes, or like juju. And I think that popular culture is very aware, right, that our energies and how we interact with people, with the world, can be felt on this other level, you
Mm,
know. When you hear someone's like, oh, I just got a really good vibe from them, or they're really chill, we're feeling and we're sensing something.
yeah.
And so, what I do in my work is I can feel and connect with the energies that people are putting out vibrationally. Sometimes people look at this work in an easy way through muscle testing, or applied kinesiology, if people have ever heard of that. And
Mm,
in muscle testing, the principle, sorry, I'm going to take off my beads. The principle is really that when we are connecting with something or something resonates with us, our energy body tends to expand, right? We get bigger, we get wider, right? My face is smiling and opening up, my chest is opening up, right? And even in psychology, when we do somatic work, we might tell people, open up your chest,
yes.
breathe in, take a smile, right? And those are kind of behavioral cues,
Yeah.
but those behavioral cues are connected to vibrational cues, which
Mm,
is expansion.
mhm.
And so when something is going well for us in life or we resonate with something, we expand. And then when we're facing challenges in life, when there's stress, or when there's distress, we start to contract. You can
Mhm.
just see me, right? I'm
Mhm.
like, and then, when we get really sad, we like go
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
and even anger, we like contract.
Yeah.
So, vibrational energy science or vibrational energy medicine tends to look at that, just as computers go like 0 1 0 1,
Mm.
in vibration work, you're looking at expansion and contraction.
Oh.
And then when you talk about, you hear a lot in spiritual communities, people talking about vibrating high,
Mhm.
and that's someone who can hold a sustained energetic vibration of expansion and
Mm.
spaciousness.
Mm.
And so, what we are trying to do in this work is to, one, recognize, oh, I vibrate, right? And to notice when we're contracting and when we're expanding.
Mm.
And that can give you that somatic or body cue of like, oh, I really like that thing. Or maybe that thing might not be in resonance with me, right? That's like the first step. And then as we build on that knowing, it would mean really growing it and cultivating it, so that you can vibrate at a higher level. So there's many things in the world that vibrate at that sustained kind of expansive space. Roses are like one of the highest vibration flowers. So when people take flower essences or oils such as rose oil, you might notice like your heart and your chest opening. That's because the vibration of the rose is very high.
Mm.
Or like when we listen to certain music or like a sound bowl, again, you notice that, your energy just moves open
Yeah.
because again, that the sound of that bowl is resonating at a very high frequency.
Mm.
And so it's this intersection of science and spirituality. The science is that everything vibrates. It's just we have different instruments that can measure it or not. And at this very refined level, um, sometimes there's not that kind of physical human eye instrument that can notice that change. But if you put, nodes on somebody, you'd see that shift, right, in their brain or their heart rate. And so I'm mixing that science work with the spirituality, which is, the breath work or integrating divine light to help people be able to see where they may not be vibrating as strongly or as vibrantly as they want, and helping them to release stuck emotions or mental cognitive patterns so that they can vibrate in a more vibrant, full kind of energy.
So it sounds like you really lead them into different practices of with their body, being in touch with their body and noticing how that differs when they go from movement to movement. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah. And sometimes it's so subtle that people may not initially notice it.
That's what I was
And
wondering.
so my job is to be like an interpreter,
Yeah.
you know? So like I might have you say a statement because when we say things out loud, it's a practice for us hearing how we think about that.
Yeah.
You just say like, "Oh, I like hamburgers." You're kind of like your stomach just goes like, "Ah," something like that. You can really notice. But sometimes I might say a statement and I'm not really sure, or I notice that I'm confused or I have some doubt. And so that's when a practitioner, and there's many different types of practitioner, but in my case, I'll notice that doubt or confusion, and then I will locate the meridian or the chakra where that vibration is wobbly. And
Ah,
then by focusing on it or tapping or breathing into that chakra meridian that needs more support, that will clear so that you want to be able to say that statement and have like that strong knowing as opposed to that like, I'm not sure.
so when you say you're the interpreter, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier, that you feel what the other party, what the person is going through. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so people, have probably have heard of like people who are clairvoyant or clairaudient or clairsentient, right? And these are just like our senses, but heightened or refined or more practiced so that you are seeing or you're listening or you're noticing or knowing more intently. So, a clairvoyant person can see
Mm,
things that like the normal human eye may not notice, which may be colors,
mhm,
which may be shadows. Sometimes they can notice spirits, right? A
mhm,
clear audient person, it's about listening. So, like for me, I can hear certain words or certain vibrations, or when something feels resonant or something feels like discordant, I can hear that. And then I'm also clairsentient, which is that feeling sense, that knowing sense that in my body, I can feel when something's stuck in someone's system.
mhm.
Like I might mirror them and like feel that stomach ache. And I think that a lot of healers, practitioners, therapists have that gift. When
Yeah.
you know something is off a little, or you're like, oh, my chest just contracted after the client talked like that, right? And so in my work, it's just about saying yes to that noticing and
Mm.
then leveling it up to be like, let's talk about what just contracted.
I know that when we went to that conference, I don't remember what year it was around that time that I started to notice that in myself, actually, that clear sentience thing, that my body, I would notice what was going on in my body when I'm sitting with a client before they even speak to it. And I swear at first I was like, oh, this is really weird. And when they talked about it, I was like, it kind of like jolted me a little bit because that was not in my realm at all prior to that.
Hmm, hmm,
So I'm really curious on how you came into these gifts of yours, because that's a
hmm,
developing part of me. And it seems like you're so practiced in it already.
hmm, hmm. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's something that's not talked about in a lot of graduate schools,
Yeah.
who are training therapists, counselors, social workers. We might notice it, but really how to use it and cultivate it or work with it. And for me, it actually started in grad school, which is like I said, why I left after my master's, because I was seeing clients and I would get so sick
Uh,
after being in the room with them.
wow.
Like stomach aches, going to the bathroom, nausea. And I was like, I cannot keep practicing like this if every time I step into a room with a client, I'm having this response, right? And I don't know when you went to school, but I was going to school in 97 to
Mm,
99. And at that time, too, all of this work, I think, in the mainstream world was just starting
mhm,
to be talked about. So definitely in my school, we weren't really talking about these things. I think if anything, people may have categorized it more negatively, like, oh, you're hypersensitive or you're like a empath or you're like a highly
mhm,
sensitive person and you
mhm,
need to just block this or you need to like create boundaries,
mhm,
around this. So anyways, I left, like I said, after my master's, and it wasn't until hmm, maybe like 7 years, 6 or 7 years, where I actually ran into a healer who also was a former academic. Her name is Trinity Ordona, and she got her PhD from UCSF in women gender studies. And when I met her, she was starting this path and she was doing this kind of work. And at the time, I was working with Asian women around the intersection of research and social justice and healing, but in a very broad way, for Asian women. And we just invited her to our class, and she just started talking about chakras and breath work. And I noticed I had such a response. In
Mm,
fact, I was crying. And I was like, what? What is this? Like, I'm supposed to be like holding this group, right, for these
mm,
students, and I'm the one who's crying.
mm,
And so I noticed and realized, like, oh, there's something here
mm,
that wants to be seen and acknowledged and healed. And I think I need to figure out and do something about it. And so Trinity, amazingly enough, she was teaching at City College, San Francisco at the time, and she was teaching a lesbians relations class. And one of the classes she was holding for the entire semester was a psychic healing course, for people who had experienced trauma, especially sexual trauma in their life.
mm.
And so it was a very kinesthetic class where, we weren't reading things. We were coming into class and practicing.
Mm.
We were like clearing out our chakras. We were
Uh-oh.
uh, releasing stuck emotions. Sorry, where my journey to really unpack
Your video
this.
froze for a little bit, so I'm sorry.
Mhm,
Um, you were talking about in the class, she was leading you through some of these practices itself. So
mhm.
I'm sorry, can I have you repeat that part?
Yeah. So she was leading us through different healing practices like chakra cleansing, breath work, some psychic work to really help
Mm,
heal our relationship trauma in that class.
mm,
And that was the beginning for me to see, oh, this modality of healing is working for me.
mm-hmm,
I am feeling release.
mm-hmm,
I am able to go deep within myself and see things that are wanting to heal.
mm,
And so that was the beginning for me of kind of activating this. And
mm,
then I just ended up going to different types of healers. And as I was going to the different types of healing modalities, I personally saw kind of like what you did, but to myself, that before the practitioner said something, I knew where it was.
mm,
You know, um, I go to chiropractic and especially have found successful for me these techniques called NET and
mm,
NIS,
mm-hmm.
neuro emotional technique, and being able to locate the meridian where the block is associated with the emotion, and then tapping, your face or having
Mm.
an instrument run down your spine to clear. And
Wow.
so I was noticing that I could like identify where the blocks were. And so just
Mm,
working with my practitioner, I was like, oh, this is weird,
mm-hmm.
And so then I started doing different trainings and practicing, and so now it's just over time when you practice something long enough, you know, it becomes easier and easier, and
Yeah,
then you use that muscle more.
right. I'm getting energized hearing about all that. So exciting. And it sounds like you've been on this seeking path, learning from all these different practitioners and modalities, like you said, we don't get in grad school. Um,
Mm-mm.
and you just coming into all these intuition and these gifts of yours sounds so awesome. And I would imagine, I don't know if this is true for you. Was there, you talked about, it sounds like you were absorbing so much from your clients actually in your master's
Mm-hmm.
program. Was it confusing going through these different paths and learning all these different modalities that when you started to sense things and see things, how was that for you?
What do you mean confusing?
Confusing, I guess, like I'm again, I'm thinking about myself, like I had to figure out was that mine or was that the client? And when I sense things in my body. So it may be
Mm,
because I'm so new at it that I just, definitely better at it now. Like I'm able to say, okay, this is not mine. That's that stuff. I wonder if that's theirs type of thing. So maybe with practice, you get better at that, but I don't know as you learn these different things, um, if that was a little sort of confusing, or maybe confusing is not the right word, but it's probably, I would imagine, a lot to try to incorporate.
hmm. Well, I can say that in the beginning, like when I was doing that master's program, I didn't know it was other people, right? I didn't know I
Right.
was absorbing their energy. I thought it was me. I thought it was I cannot handle
Mhm.
doing therapy because I'm too sensitive, right? Which
Yeah.
is why I left,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Um,
How horrible. Wow.
so so I didn't think it was other people's stuff.
Mm.
And I think that I still wouldn't go in today doing talk therapy because what my gift is to help people facilitate the shift in energy awareness and
Mm.
transmuting it.
Mm.
So if I'm just talking, I don't get to use that skill with them to be like, hey, how can we shift it? We're
Yeah.
just like talking about this energy and it's just sitting here,
Yeah.
you know? And I think in terms of what's others and what's ours, it's really a mix of both. Because usually when something of a client's is hitting me so much, it is something in me
That's a good point. That's a
that's
good point.
resonating,
Yeah.
right? That I maybe have unresolved things about,
Yeah. Yeah.
or that I have some guilt or shame or whatever unresolved thing it is. And that's why it is irritating me. And
Mm.
so it's a both and, right? They're a mirror for me, just as
Mm.
I'm a mirror for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that especially in the beginning, it's like identifying, wow, what happened in that session that like impacted me so much, and then how do I need to
Mm-hmm.
work with myself to clear it,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think over time you get clearer and clearer, like where that tangle is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. And I notice when kind of like you, am exploring and taking these different classes that are not psychology, therapy, continuing education classes. These are really more psychic classes that I've been drawn to. And there's such a difference, like those classes really walk you through these practices as a practitioner, so that you're also clearing yourself as you learn these techniques to be able to hold and facilitate in others. That is so different than our traditional psychology graduate programs, right? And so I really appreciate that, being able to differentiate and really clear and do our own work along the way.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I'm wondering, as you hold space, what I would imagine you probably, because like you said, energy is everywhere, right? And it sounds like you could be so attuned to it. How do you prepare yourself for sessions, and how do you, I don't know if you like clear yourself, or what do you see people in person? Anyways, obviously I have
Hmm.
a lot of
Hmm.
questions, so I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
how how you align yourself to be able to differentiate more. Does that make
Um,
sense, my question?
yeah, I think that there's things that I do in the physical world, and then there's things that I do in the spiritual world,
Mm,
and both are important. One thing I wear jewelry, and I think that's really important.
mm,
Different people have medallions or pendants,
yeah.
like different protection things that I wear, or like you see me wear these beads,
Mm,
um, so that you don't have to do all the work that yourself,
yeah.
you know? So I wear these. I also have two discs. I have this gold disc. I have this other green disc,
Ah,
and I always sit with these discs when I work. So
ah,
the gold disc is for harmony,
mm,
and it's made by my teacher in Malaysia. They're just aluminum, but they're activated
Mm,
energetically with
mm,
frequencies. So
mm,
this one's has that harmony and love frequency. And
mm,
oftentimes I also give it to the client to hold when we're doing session. This one is
mm.
it's actually to
Yes.
help kind of protect yourself from spirits that are disruptive. So
Ah,
this is a Chinese sign Fu, right?
mm,
So it's a Taoist thing. And so
mm,
like the reason why I started using these when I first met them, I noticed such a shift. Like I went like this and I felt like the parting of the Red Sea. Like all these spirits who were around me just like cleared. And I
ah,
was like, oh, it was like Windex. This is this is crazy, because I think in a lot of our work we have a lot of hungry ghosts or just a lot of spirits who are, you know, wanting things or needing things. Um, and so I always have these discs and I started selling them and selling the jewelry for the same reason that I saw that they are really helpful in helping us hold our energy or shift our energy in a
mhm,
certain way. The other thing I do is I always put on different oils. So like right now I'm using this oil that's good for the sixth chakra, which is it's called Vision. But I use very, very high vibration oils too, and I put them on myself again to help me hold that vibration. So different oils have different properties. Some oils are very good at opening the crown, like frankincense, myrrh, like a lot
mm,
of royalty use them, or like
mm,
people who remember the Bible remember like frankincense and myrrh was like used to like cloth Jesus because those are very high
mm,
vibration oils that open up the crown chakra.
mm,
Um, you might with clients who are facing a lot of like kind of more depressive symptomatology, you use the more like citrusy oils because they kind of imbue this quality of joy and
mm,
lightness and they
yeah.
support the third chakra. So like a lot of
Mm,
lemons, a lot of oranges, lemongrass, they
mm,
kind of like lift,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
You have the roses and the lavenders that support the heart chakra. So I always have my oils, and again, I use them with myself and clients. I have different sprays. I use flower essence services, and they have a range of sprays that, again, I use them for different emotions. There's a spray I use for shame, a spray I use for grief, a spray I use for
Mm,
fear, a spray I use for anger, again, for me and the client. So those are the things in the physical world that I do to help the body recalibrate. And
yeah.
in the spirit world, it's like opening up that channel to bring in, some people call them guides or
Mm,
divine wisdom. Some people,
mm,
connect with God and the universe. But I
mm,
think that's if not more important than the physical things, to stay
mm,
connected with divine source in this work so that you can be neutral, so
mhm,
that you can hear information that's coming from other realms or other dimensions that are not in the 3D world.
mm,
And so that's how I do it. And then sometimes I listen to transmissions, like I do some transmissions and I little listen to other people's transmissions. And again, they're calling in divine energy. So I like run them in the session, or I run them before session, or I run them after session, whether I'm preparing or I'm clearing to
mm.
have my energy field listen to that vibration.
I'm wondering if you could help clarify a little bit when because you talked about the jewelry, and I love all these different aspects that it sounds like you're very, again, integrated in incorporating these different beautiful, lovely, uh, different, I want, what did it, modes, techniques, I guess.
Hmm.
But you used the word activation, activating the jewelry, for example. You use the word transmission. And I'm going like this because
Hmm.
it sounds like it's very using the mind and inviting the spirit. So that's my
Hmm.
interpretation. Can you explain a little bit more what that
Yeah,
means? What those mean?
yeah. So I think different spiritual and religious traditions have this kind of a technique. Maybe in Catholicism, people know like holy water or
Hmm.
holy oil,
Yeah.
that something's prayed on or blessed, right? Like you might see the
Mm.
priest bless, or like
Yeah.
even when you think about taking communion, right? You're like seeing people put
Mm.
hands on something and they're
Mhm.
praying or blessing. And the
Mhm.
intention is that pure intention from the heart gets
Mm.
transferred from the heart and the hands. The hands are such a powerful transmitter. That's why like massage and touch therapy are so
Mm.
powerful. Gets transmitted onto something that we're trying to bless.
Mhm.
In Buddhism and in Confucianism, that Chinese word kai guang, where you're like
Mm.
literally putting light on something, right?
Ah,
So you can do that to a
yeah.
statue, you can do that to Guanyin,
Mm. Ah.
you can do that in a room. And again,
Mm.
it's that positioning of opening the hands and letting divine light through you,
Mm.
whether it's divine light or pure intention of the universe.
Mhm.
It's like drawing this energy from above, down the crown,
Mm.
down the spine, letting it go through the heart and out the hand, and opening the hand and letting it
Mm.
whoosh out,
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
right? When you think about Chinese medicine and Taoism, that's so funny that I use Confucianism instead of Taoism just before. I meant Taoism. And you talk about Qigong, right? That's again
Mm.
connecting with energy. And there's a
Mhm. Yep.
hand,
Yep.
right? You're moving the energy through your hands.
Yep.
And if you look at like Kung Fu, right? Or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
some of those Chinese like action and fantasy movies, and we were like, shh, and the
Yes.
person's like, what is that? That's
Shoots the
energy
energy
that's
out.
being sent out the hand and
Mhm.
impacting your opponent, right? Or
Yeah.
when they like go and they like dagger somebody at the acupuncture points, it's all energy flow.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking about activation and transmissions. Again, it's used in more mystical aspects of different religions, whether it's like mystical Christianity, mystical Judaism, mystical parts of Buddhism and Taoism, where you're opening the crown and letting the divine move energy through the crown into your body to receive information. And then
Mhm.
you're just like a lighthouse and you're just like letting that energy move out. And
Mm.
so like, people who do Reiki, for example, that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
People who doing Qigong, that's what they're doing. Um, so there's many, I think, healing and energetic and religious traditions, especially in the East,
Yeah.
where we know how to cultivate and move energy.
Yeah.
And that's what activation and transmission means.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. As you're talking and using the hand and bringing the energy down it really reminded me of Reiki actually, especially sending
Hmm.
out the energy out to the hands. Yeah.
Hmm.
That very powerful and lovely. Yeah. And it sounds like you do that again, very intentionally, and depending on what the client is needing. So I'm wondering if you mentioned, I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about the jewelry that you have on your website, the activation jewelries, and I saw that you have some recordings of transmissions as
Hmm.
well. Would you be okay talking about some of that?
Yeah. Do you want to ask me a specific question about the jewelry or the discs, and then I can respond?
Well, I'm not wearing any today actually, but I have a lot of those different, and mine are not specifically activated. Although, certain stones have certain meanings.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I have a lot. It's like a collection of mine.
Hmm.
And I see you have some beautiful ones. And I know that when we talked, I think you also mentioned that they're from Malaysia. And
Hmm.
so maybe you could explain a little bit more. I don't know if it's for the stones, and I know notice different colors as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
can you explain a little bit about
Yeah.
those?
Thank you for asking that question. That's really helpful for me. So, like you said, stones have different properties, and many people are familiar with that, or you can type up a stone and you look at like the spiritual property, the
Yeah,
physical property,
yeah,
the emotional property, right? And especially nowadays, I think people are really connecting to nature, and this is connecting to nature because they're stones. So this is a green one. Green is the color of the heart chakra. This is the green
Mm-hmm.
aventurine.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think of green, we think of opening the heart. We also think of prosperity. This bracelet's called
Mm-hmm.
Lucky Eight. But what makes these bracelets that I sell different from other stone bracelets is, like I said, they're activated
Yeah.
by a Taoist Grand Master. His
Mm-hmm.
name is Grandmaster Jess Lim. And so he will program these bracelets so they do not feel like a normal bracelet for those people who are clairsentient. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had so many different stories about people's connectivity with these bracelets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes I will pick a bracelet that calls somebody and they'll put it on and they just start crying.
Mm.
It's
Wow.
so powerful that
Powerful.
the bracelet has connected to something within them.
Mm.
The release is there,
Yeah. Wow.
that you don't even know. It's not cog cognizant, it's not
Yeah.
conscious, but
Yeah.
it's again, it just lifts some energy.
Yeah.
There are other people, and I notice people who have very, very strong connections to their ancestors. These bracelets are very powerful.
Oh,
And it's
it's
almost like you're
fascinating.
putting on something and it's like a string connected to your ancestor. So
Yeah.
I see this a lot with Southeast Asians because in my experience, a lot of Southeast Asians have a very strong connection with their ancestors. So
Mm.
like, this bracelet is rose quartz and that's love,
Mm.
and different ancestors might come and just land on it and want to give it to their descendant.
Um,
So yeah, the bracelet is very powerful. Other people can feel things. I went to a convening once and like this guy puts them on and he's like, "Eh, I'm like Shang-Chi. I have my like, you know, bracelets," and like he could feel like how
mm-hmm.
that energy was just moving through them. So it's like they're living. We know that stones are living, but that activation gives them that extra vibrancy,
Yeah.
and even with the discs, I've had
Mm-hmm.
people hold them and start crying when
Wow.
they've just had a very intense emotion in their body, and just
Mm-hmm.
holding the disc can clear it, or they use the
Mm-hmm.
disc and they rub it on themselves to like
Mm-hmm.
release
Mm-hmm.
tension.
Mm-hmm. That is so awesome. And I would imagine, because, again, I'm thinking about the clients that are sitting with me. Sometimes they start crying and they don't know the reason that they're crying. And we don't have to have understanding. It sounds like when we start to cry, I would imagine it's a release. It's sort of a clearing, right? The water and the tears are sort of
Yeah.
helping to wash our body.
I think that thing about knowing why you're crying, it really depends on different clients. Some
Mm,
clients, they don't need all that processing or all that insight,
yeah.
right? They can be like, oh, clear, done, out.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
moving forward, right?
yeah.
And then some people, they want to understand.
Mhm.
And for those clients, I actually have an app. I don't know if you heard about this during that conference we went to, but it's called the Body Code. And I actually learned about it from that conference. And I
Um,
bought the app and I use that
mm,
app in every session.
oh, interesting. Okay.
That app, I think, I might be wrong, but I think it's created by a chiropractor. But it holds both emotional, spiritual, cognitive, and mental, as well as physical
Oh,
um, disruptions that could be impacting the body. So
mm,
when a client starts crying like that, and they're like, I don't know why I'm crying,
mm,
I'll open up the app and I just start listening to the crying and again, making that resonance of finding
mm,
where the connection is. And then I can say,
mm,
oh, the app is saying that there's something about blah, 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 blah.
mm,
And then we start talking about that. And that's the more therapeutic, if you want to use that word, or psychological aspect, is like calling up something, whether it's in the emotional realm or the mental realm, and saying, oh, your body said it's something about rejection
mm,
at age 3. Do you remember anything
mm,
happening to you at age
mm,
3?
mm,
So it's very similar to psychology in terms of like going to the past or looking at different dynamics, but the
mm,
body code allows us to be more specific And so rather than just being like, I know it's something that happened in my childhood, we can get specific as in terms of what age, who that conflict might have been with, and where in your body it's stuck, and what emotion is actually held in your body.
Wow.
And that's why this kind of work is like so fast compared to therapy,
Right.
talk therapy, because the identification
Yeah.
is what makes it faster instead of us talking and us figuring
Trying to
out like
figure it
what that
out.
thing was. Like I can
Yeah.
tell you in like 30 seconds what your body's vibration is showing.
Yeah.
And then you can talk about that.
So I noticed that you were saying when you say you use the app, it sounds like what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is you intuitively as you go through, you start to intuit with what fits for them. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, so when you go take a body code course, they're gonna teach you how to strengthen your muscle testing.
Uh,
Okay, and so like a general practitioner usually uses muscle testing,
uh-huh.
whether it's with the client or on themselves, or they might use a pendulum.
Can you
So for
say a little bit
me,
more for those that may not understand, know what muscle testing is?
sure, muscle testing is like what I talked about at the beginning of the session, where when we resonate with something, we expand.
Yeah,
When we don't resonate, we contract,
yeah.
right? And muscle testing is also called applied kinesiology. So a chiropractor, for example, will lift your hand up. And if you resonate with something you see, there's like not really it doesn't go down. But then let's say like the chiropractor might say something that I don't like or I'm allergic to, and you just notice the body drop.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may be like, oh, that's like a placebo effect, or you already know the thing you don't like. But when chiropractors are doing it, they're doing it on things that you don't know if you like or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we're trying to identify,
Yeah.
you know, and or like they might put a supplement on your body to see if your
Mm-hmm.
body resonates with that supplement or not. So there's less of a, I would say, mental or
Mm-hmm.
placebo effect because you don't usually know what
Yeah.
supplement or medicines are good for you. So that's what a chiropractor does. They'll just like tap your hand. Other people use this kind of a technique, and
Mm-hmm.
like if something is resonant, it doesn't break, but if
Yeah.
something um is contracted, it like your hand goes like that. Everybody has to have their own method of doing it. I use a pendulum where I
Mm-hmm.
can feel the vibration of yes and no, and I've trained that pendulum
Mm-hmm.
so much, it's worked with me for so long, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then my muscle testing is kind of internal because I'm kinesthetic and clairsentient that
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like I hear this thing where it sounds discordant or like my chakras like kind of like contract,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so um that's what that is. And so like I said, different people will use different techniques like muscle testing, like a pendulum with that body code app to
Mm-hmm.
find that place where
Mm-hmm.
you're resonating with and to identify and locate where in the body this emotion or this mental um, thought is getting stuck.
Yeah. Wow. So powerful. And like you said, it could get at the issues quicker because our brain often doesn't have these capacity for the specific memory and connecting time wise, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the body does,
Yeah.
you know the book, The Body Keeps Score, but it's like the body holds all the memories. So like
Yeah.
that's why I'm always talking to the body because it knows things that
Yeah.
sometimes our mind, we call it monkey mind, is
Yeah.
creating so many stories, but the body's very still because it knows what
Mm-hmm.
it thinks.
Mm-hmm. So for those clients who are very heady,
Mhm.
I would, is there a different process with them?
To be honest, people that are often very heady, who don't have the desire to reconnect with their body,
Mm-hmm.
this modality isn't always successful because they're
Mm-hmm.
staying in their head so much. There's so many questions, so many doubts. They
Yeah.
keep staying up here above the
Yeah.
neck,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you are a heady client, but you know that you want to reconnect with your body,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
you want to learn to listen, that you want to integrate your mind with your body,
Yeah.
then that can work. And
Okay.
really that's the goal for many I would say like healing techniques, including mine, which is we're trying to integrate you. Not
Yes.
like have your mind say this, your body say this, your spirit say that, your heart say that, right? Then like of course we're disconnected.
Yeah.
And like all of these works are trying to bring all of you together
Mm-hmm.
and so that you can sit in your whole self,
Mm-hmm.
even in all of that complexity,
Mm-hmm.
and just be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So beautiful. I keep getting I don't know what this sensation is, like not quite chills, but goosebumps a little bit. Yeah, just energy. Yeah. It's resonating a lot. So thank you for explaining all of that. Um, I'm also curious, I keep seeing the green stone that's on your ring, and it's beautiful. I don't know if that's part of the activated jewelry connect collection.
This one's not. This one I bought at a show in Marin, but it's a peridot. And again, green is that color of vibrancy and health. And
Yeah.
so I put that on to help with that.
It reminds me so much of the Chinese culture. There's a lot of jade jewelry, right?
Yep,
And it's that same idea, right?
exactly. And I think like, you know, we started off this conversation saying like, oh, we're like the kind of the only two Asians in that room that day. And we both know this, and I think many people know this. So many of these traditions come out of Asia,
Yeah,
all these practices,
yeah,
like chakra work is from India,
yeah,
meridian work is Chinese.
yeah.
Um, and so breath work is in many, spiritual traditions. But I think that that's what I'm hoping, I think, especially for Asian community and Asian clients to it's been repackaged in a more Western context today.
Yeah.
And, like the body app, or I have a feng shui app. It's amazing. That's
What's
like
it
the
called?
the latest. Huh?
What's it called again?
It's a feng shui app, but the person's name is Marie Diamond.
Oh,
And through that app, she's again been able to package feng shui in a way that's so helpful and accessible. And you put in your birthday, and then there's a compass on the app. So you can literally see the direction of like where you should be facing for health, where you should be facing for
oh,
success,
feng shui.
where you should be
Yes.
facing for
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think like there needs to be a way, and there is a way for us to integrate, right? Okay, the Western world has taken these ancient Asian wisdoms,
Yeah.
right, and made it accessible for the whole world.
Yeah.
And for those of us who these traditions um, kind of, were rooted in, I think it's time for us to be like, oh, yeah, let's come back and learn about them
Yes.
too,
Yes.
and not be afraid or think something is not scientific, because I
Yeah.
think that's what often happens is
Mm.
like the things that I'm talking about, people might be like, oh, that's just superstition, or like, oh, that's like what my grandma
Mm.
did, or, things like
Mm-hmm.
that, but that there's an actual intersection of spirituality and science,
Mm-hmm.
you
They're
know?
finding more and more, right? Of
Yeah. And
right.
so like that's my hope is that um people can come back and learn. And what I want to say about that too is I really notice in my work, I don't know if you notice it in yours, but people's spiritual kind of cosmology really impacts how I do the work with them.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like they come with their spiritual background. People who are like Catholic, they have certain, saints that they work with, and that's who comes into the session. And so
Mm.
we work with them. A
Mm-hmm.
Buddhist person might come in and different deities come in or
Mm-hmm.
different mantras, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so it's really beautiful to see how our own spiritual practice and worldview can intersect with this kind of healing work.
Yeah.
And so when I work with people who have more Taoist background
Mm,
or do Qigong or, things like that, the work is very, very fast
mm,
because they know what I'm talking about,
yeah. Yeah.
or they kind of like their spirits understand that, and so then I
Mm,
just switch different spiritual practices or switch different religious um kind of like context to support
mm,
clients.
Whew, again, more of the tilts, energies, vibrations, I guess you would call them. Um, I know that you have mentioned, just kind of switching focus a little bit, love all these different integrations and really being attuned again to who walks in the door, sounds like, and adjusting in what they bring, as you said, and particularly, for example, the spirituality background that they come in the room with. Um, but you have such a creative part and very much part of who you are. I know that you had mentioned also this uh, play that you've been writing, involved in, and creating, and I know you've already done one or more than one, I'm sure. And this virtual reality one, love for you to talk more about that, actually.
Yeah. So the play is called Out of the Box, and it's the story of an Asian American woman who gets denied tenure and decides to play a virtual reality therapy game to try to deal with this midlife crisis.
Uh-huh.
And there begins her journey in the game. And I was
Mm,
really excited to do this play slash interactive game because I wanted to show people what happens in a session
mm,
or these alternative ways of what healing could look like, or what does it look like when our ancestors come and talk to us? And like, is it always a good thing? Are they sometimes disruptive?
mm,
And
mm,
to really open up this world that I have when I'm with my clients,
mm.
but I feel that is beneficial and would love other people to explore all these different kinds of ways of healing. So that's the impetus of the play. And right now, we did a reading back in December 2022, which was a lot of fun. And the main character has two avatars,
Mm.
body and mind.
Mhm.
Again, because of this thing that I'm talking about is how does our body respond to things and how does our mind respond to things? So I'm in a rewrite right now,
Mhm.
trying to explore the game realm, how to make it more interactive. And um, yeah, so I'm really curious to see where it's going to go, but really excited for people to experience it and think about healing in a different way and even think about participating in a play or a game in a different
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. Mhm. Sounds so exciting and fun and opportunity for learning a lot about themselves and the world, it sounds like. Yeah.
I've noticed, like I said, I've been fascinating in all these different ways of healing that are kind of like non-traditional and really fascinated about video games
Mm-hmm.
and how people use video games to heal. There's
Mm.
one game called Kina, um, Spirit Warrior, I think. Anyway, it's a story about a girl who has to go on a journey, and in the journey, she ends up collecting um, different objects and then meeting the mountain gods. So it's very shamanic. And
Oh.
I don't want to give away the end of the game, but there's a lot of community healing
Mm.
that happens through this game.
Mm.
And then there's other games where people are like mourning a loss, or
Mm-hmm.
people who have mourned a loss like to play. And then
Mm.
there's another game that's all about cooperation, you
Wow.
know. So I'm so fascinated with how we can think about healing in such different ways that are much more experiential to people. And as we learn by doing something, we get some insight that changes our daily life.
So awesome to hear that video games are now more incorporated in these healing approaches because video games. I'm not a video gamer, and there's been such bad rap and how violent that they've been, and so it's really nice
Mhm.
to hear these different approaches actually.
Well, I think that that's kind of like one of the things that I'm interested in is like something can be dystopic and have a negative impact on the world, but it doesn't have to be, right? And so you're seeing people take a tool
Mm,
and
mm, mhm.
finding really not just positive, but really impactful ways of using it. And I
Yeah,
think that every tool has that potential, right? And
yeah,
that's why in exploring VR or in exploring interactivity with technology, again, AR and VR have such, and AI obviously have now had a very
yeah.
bad rap. But is there a way that these
Mm,
tools can be used for
mhm,
our evolution and healing?
mhm.
I've been listening to this book called The Art of Immersion, and it's just funny how, like, in every technological leap, people are afraid of that new communication method.
Yeah.
Like people were afraid of radio. And what would happen when people started listening to the radio? They wouldn't talk anymore to each other. They wouldn't sing anymore because they would listen to the radio, right? Like people thought that about books. Stories were
Um,
passed orally. How
mhm,
we connect with others is
mhm.
orally. And then what happens if it's now catalyzed in a book and we're going to start losing our memory and we're going to start losing our interconnectivity, right?
Mm,
But books now have a way of recording and keeping history and stories alive for so much longer than just an oral
mm,
tradition. So it's
mhm,
not about like anyone being bad, but the
mm.
additive value
Yeah,
of that new technology. And whether we like it or not, we're obviously moving in a new technological age. I mean, like, when I was going to undergrad, the internet like
yeah,
just started,
yeah,
right?
right,
And now it's a part of our life and phones are a part of our life.
right.
So I think that's what I'm more curious about in our
Mhm.
world is like, how do we use tools in a transformative way, regardless of people who are using it in other ways, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the role of a creator.
Mm.
It's
That's so
to
awesome.
do
Yeah.
something else with something.
Yeah. Such a good point. Yeah, as you're talking, I was thinking about the phones too, that, there's so much addiction from using technology in that way these days. But you're right, there could be very beneficial ways of using that tool too. That could be very helpful. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not to say that there aren't these problems, right?
Yeah.
But that cat is out the bag.
Yeah.
Like you are
Yeah.
not taking phones away.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So we might as well create something useful.
Right. Right.
It's kind
Well,
of like alcoholism, right? And prohibition. Like that prohibition didn't work.
yeah. Yeah. And that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. And I'm not like, yes, not all tools are addictive, but some,
Yeah. Well, some certainly more than others.
yes.
Yeah. I would love to have your information on the episode's site. So I will get that posted. But I wanted to s- ask you a couple more questions if as we close, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that I didn't have you talk about this so much and you kind of brought it in different ways. I'm kind of curious on how do you define your own spirituality and for yourself and your history of that. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Hmm. Well, I have always been fascinated with the divine and the
Mm,
spirit world since I was little. And I
mm,
grew up in a Christian home
mm,
and loved learning about the Bible and singing. in all the
Mm,
ways of worshiping and connecting with the divine and God, and even went to Christian school. And then in my late teens and 20s, really started having to, I think, confront some of the negative parts of Christianity in terms of colonization, or viewpoints that feel harmful, to
mm,
different communities. And it was really hard for me to rectify or make peace with this faith that I grew up loving and connecting to so much, and then learning and knowing about the ways in which it is also harmed, you
mm,
know? And so um, I stopped going to church probably when I was like 20, 21. I would keep trying to go to like different Chinese churches, to like
uh-huh,
find this connection. But it never felt quite right.
mm,
And so then in my late 20s, all these different types of spirituality really started connecting with me, learning
mm,
about Buddhism, um, connecting with Catholicism, because Catholicism has such mysticism in it,
mm,
Sufism, and really learning, and then shamanism, learning the beauty of divinity or spirituality in so many different religions.
mm,
It's just, I think that if I could have been a religion major in college,
mm,
I would, because
mhm,
I love studying how the divine appears to different people in
mm,
different cultures and
yeah,
how they connect with each other. And so I think that's what helps me be eclectic or have different kinds of
yeah,
clients, because
mm,
I know, or I have practiced, or I have been connected with so many different spiritual
yeah,
traditions and have like
yeah,
fallen in love with aspects of each of them.
mm,
It's like it just gives you different color palette to
mhm,
understand people in the
mhm,
world.
mhm,
Um, and so yeah, I would say that I don't have one spiritual practice, but it always comes back to connecting with nature,
mm, mm, mhm.
you know? And I think that so many religions have that mystical element, that spiritual element, and those are the aspects of those religions that I connect most to.
That really explains because it seems as you're talking about your work and how you incorporate, you seem so fluid and being able to pull from so many different traditions. That's so
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about this, but some people remember their past lives
Hmm.
more than others. And so I really call on and remember those past lives. That's another reason why I can have a very visceral hit on something, because I remember deep, deep down
Wow.
that,
Yeah.
whether it's a practice, um,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's just a way of being, almost like a smell, it's just a memory.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's quite powerful. Ooh, so awesome to integrate that whole other aspect as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people right now are very interested in past life regression work, and I've
Mm,
done that work myself. And I
mm,
notice for myself, it's very easy to get caught up in these past life stories and
mm,
wanting to relive those stories
mm,
and trying to find closure for them. I've had many incidences of that in my life.
mm,
And I think where I'm at now is trying to use our past lives as learning and as
mm,
growth, rather than like longing,
yeah.
wanting to go back to that time, wanting to
Mm,
redo or remember something, saying like,
mm,
okay, what did that life teach me? Why is it showing up now? How do I take the gift from that life and integrate it in
mm,
this life?
mm-hmm. Whew. Thank you for sharing that integration and that history. It's a good
Yeah, it actually,
segue. Go ahead.
uh-huh. Yeah. I was gonna segue, but let me hear your segue.
Well, it's a good segue for my next question is,
Yeah.
you had mentioned earlier the challenge of how sick you were getting and in grad school, and that prompted a switch in your trajectory. And I'm wondering, not getting stuck in the past life and that sort of, a form of past life, if you will. I'm wondering
Mhm.
if you're able, what would you say to that you that was suffering so much at the time?
Oh
What
my
advice
gosh,
would you give her?
if I knew about all this stuff, I
Mm.
might have gone to like chiropractic school.
Oh, wow.
At that time, I was fascinated by Chinese medicine already, and I was reading books on
Mm.
Chinese medicine. My my mom was born in Shanghai, and my father was born in Hong Kong. So
Mm.
because of colonization and because of Shanghai being very wanting to stay connected to Western
Western, yeah.
culture and European culture, they did not know about Chinese medicine, or they didn't use
Yeah,
herbs and
wow.
things like that. That was
Mhm.
not part of my growing up. And so I would read these books, and
Mm.
my mom's like, "Why are you reading this stuff? Or why are you going to see a Chinese doctor?" But I was so drawn always to
Ah,
that. And I kind of like my secret wish was like, oh, I wish that I came from this lineage of Zhongyi, of Chinese doctors so that I could pass on that
mm.
lineage
Mm-hmm.
because I was so drawn to it. But I just realized, okay, that's not my lineage. Now I get to be more eclectic. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
be preservationist and traditionalist because my
Yeah,
parents didn't have that. So I can kind
yeah.
of explore. But I think I would have not gone into psychology, and I would have studied some kind of like naturopathy.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Huh. All right, what was your segue question?
My segue question was about the activations and the transmissions, because you had asked
Mm,
me about that.
mm,
So transmissions are when you bring in divine or universe consciousness, right? And it's kind of like a meditation, kind of like a guided meditation, but you're transmitting and channeling this frequency um, into the space that you are working with. And the reason why I wanted to segue it from what we were talking about earlier, it's because I have many spiritual um, kind of like affinities,
mm-hmm.
then those spirits or those guides more it's easier for me to work with them because I can see them, or I can connect to them, or I want to, as opposed to
Yeah,
just focusing on one lineage
yeah.
of beings who transmit.
Right, right. That's so awesome.
Which again makes my work, sometimes people may not like it because it is so eclectic, you know what I mean? It's always like a
Mm,
buffet,
mm,
for people who want that one thing like Reiki all the time, or like,
right,
you know what I mean?
right.
That's just not who I am.
Yeah.
So
Well, we each have our different talents, right? And things that we bring to the table. So people who resonate will come to you.
yeah.
Um, so I'm just reaching over here because I need to turn on my battery. So any last words that you would like listeners to know, and how to reach you? Where could they find you?
Yeah. Well, one, thank you, Ellen, so much for this conversation. I
Yeah.
often don't get to talk about the work or how the work looks.
Mm,
And so I really appreciate that conversation and, your connectivity with it. And um, yeah, hope that it's helpful for those who have questions or curiosities about this way of
mm.
doing healing work. And I have a YouTube channel that I think you can add on. And when
Yeah.
people go into the YouTube channel, they can experience what a transmission feels like.
Okay.
Um, and people might notice that it's pretty silent. There's not a
Mm,
lot going on. And people that I do transmissions with, and I for myself, sometimes the transmission is for me and I'm
mm,
focusing intently on listening to it. Sometimes I'm playing it for the room because I
mm-hmm,
want the room to shift, you
mm-hmm.
know And sometimes like a transmission will help you like be more efficient or effective or productive in your work. Or sometimes
Mm,
a transmission will help you deepen your own meditation process. So
yeah.
transmissions are kind of like a booster, a supporter of whatever you're doing. And so
Mm,
a lot of the transmissions that are posted right now are connected with the womb. That's one thing we didn't get to talk about.
that's right.
But last year I was on this journey to explore womb healing through doing
Mm,
transmissions for the
mm,
womb space
mm,
and just really learning about how much wisdom is in the womb, how the womb is connected so deeply
mm,
to our expression and our voice, and how our
mhm.
womb is also connected to our pituitary gland and opening our wisdom channel.
Mm,
And so, yeah, people might see that there's those womb transmissions, and yeah, I think that they're mostly beneficial for people who have wombs, but for
mm,
people who don't currently in this life have wombs, you can just think of your second chakra, or
mm,
sometimes people who are connected with past lives might think about a past life when they
mhm.
had a womb. So there's definitely different ways of integrating with that work. And then, of course, people can learn about me on my website, learn about the jewelry,
Mm.
and yeah, would love to talk and be open to other conversations. And I'll just put on my
Yeah.
art website too, so people can track what's happening with that play.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to include that. Yeah. It's been so lovely to talk and to learn more about you and your process and to learn about all the different ways that you integrate in your service for the world. So thank you for being so open and answering my many questions. I'm very curious about all of this, so I'm very excited to have this opportunity to have sat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think to all the practitioners out there to
Mm,
just really step into listening to their intuition because it's
yeah,
so powerful for our clients and in the room.
yeah.
And even though we are not trained in it, in our Western therapeutic modalities, I've found it to be so healing for me, which
Mm,
is why I started this journey. I started
yeah,
it because I was healed
yeah.
through these methods. So,
That's so true for me as well. I started to explore because I felt a shift in myself through these methods too. Yeah.
mhm,
And I really, yeah, I think for those who maybe on the very beginning, it helps to just be open, right? And
yeah,
exploring, be curious about the world. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to reconnect again and check back in at some point in the future, Amy. Thank you so much for sitting with
Thank
me
you
and
so
having
much,
this
Ellen.
conversation. Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Bye. You take care.